So good afternoon and welcome to today's Queer Town Hall. My name is Nancy Haque and I'm the Executive Director of Basic Rights Oregon. Thank you for tuning in. This week we will be focusing on the topic of hate crimes. For folks who are tuning in to hear about policies and reforms around policing, I apologize. We had to change our topic today because we didn't have the right guest to have that conversation. When we do talk about it, we want to honor both the Black activists who've been working on the issue for decades and the younger activists who are asking for more radical change. So we will have that conversation, just not today. But today's topic, hate crimes, has traditionally been somewhat around policing because traditionally it's been around talking about hate crimes legislation has been about longer prison terms. But today we're going to talk about a different approach to hate crimes, one that's more focused on the victims of hate crimes rather than the perpetrators. And we're also going to hear from communities that are experiencing high rates of hate crimes and other violence. So I hope you join us and keep joining us for what's sure to be a lively and informative hour. We have some amazing guests today from across town and across the country, and to talk about this really hard topic, which is hate crimes. And hate crimes are crimes against people based on the color of their skin, their religion, their ethnicity, their sexual orientation, or their gender identity. And we know that here in Oregon, we've had an uptick in hate crimes, especially since Donald Trump was elected. And we also know that we passed a pretty remarkable bill in the state legislature in 2019. And meanwhile, across the country, we see that there is an a horrible uptick around violence against trans people, especially trans women of color, especially Black trans women who continue to be murdered at alarming rates. So there's our guest will address all these topics today, and we want to hear your questions. So please ask your questions via YouTube comment. Everyone who asks a question or donates will be entered into a drawing for a Protect Trans Kids tote bag. And our program will be a brief 1 hour today, so feel free to start sending questions our way right away. So let's begin by hearing from our amazing panelists. As usual, I will go in alphabetical order. And I don't think Earline, who's coming to us from Washington, D.C., is ready to be on the panel yet. So I will start with Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum. And your first question is sharing your name, your pronouns, something about the work you do, and today's icebreaker. Tell us something good or positive you've learned during this quarantine time.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Nancy, and to Bro for hosting this event. It is such an honor to be with you and to be with these amazing panelists. I'm looking forward to hearing what they all have to say. Frankly, I always learn so much, and this is a time for me to be listening and learning. And so I'm even hesitant to accept speaking engagements, although this one I just could not turn down. But seriously, our electeds, we need to be listening. We need to make sure that people of color and people LGBTQ community, our disabled community, that are not just stepping up, but that we have them at the table and that we are together, but we're the ones doing the listening. So with that, let me talk for just a couple of minutes. Yeah, on the icebreaker, I was thinking, you asked about, how are we reacting to quarantine in particular. And of course, it's been a long time now. And I remember that first week thinking, how long can this go on? And who knew it would be this long, and it could even be longer, although I am getting out a little bit more. But mostly I've been sheltering at home and teleworking from home, along with my entire agency, the 1,300 employees of the Oregon Department of Justice. But what I did want to say is I really miss one thing, and I really don't miss one other thing. So what I really miss is hugging my grandkids. I have a 2- and 5-year-old grandchild, and I snuck one hug after I put some rain gear on them to make sure that we were safe, and it was delightful. The thing I don't miss, and some are surprised at this, I don't miss flying on airplanes and going to conferences. So much as I miss seeing some of my colleagues, that part's okay. But I am a people person, so it's been tough. And I'd love to talk a little bit about the work we do at the Oregon Department of Justice. Is this the time to do that, or do you want to introduce the other panelists? I'll talk for just a minute about that. So a lot of people don't realize that in addition to a criminal justice division and a civil rights unit, we also have what's known as CVSSD, which is Crime Victims and Survivors Services Division. So the work we do in all three of those divisions is very much at the sort of the intersection of hate crimes and the topic of today. And so in the summer of 2017, with the horrible Max Train killings, my office stepped up and held a symposium that summer in July. The killings were in May. And that was held at the Muslim Educational Trust. And after that, we realized we had to do more than just talk. We needed to take action. So we decided to launch a hate crimes task force in 2017 that would make recommendations to the 2018 legislative session. We knew we only had a few months. We didn't have much time, but we knew that we could enlist amazing people like Inger and her colleagues at Unite Oregon, who will be speaking, like Zakir Khan, who's been an absolute amazing leader in this regard. And we had a real broad coalition. We held listening sessions throughout the state. We enlisted the Bruce family that were victims of a horrible hate crime. So many joined together to make this legislation a reality. And so today, here we are, several years later, actually being able to demonstrate what we were able to accomplish. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about that later on. And I've asked Johanna Costa, who is now working at Oregon DOJ, who is our bias crimes coordinator and running our new hotline, and also issued our new toolkit to law enforcement, to talk about some of the work that we're doing as well. So thanks for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Attorney General. And next, I will give the same set of questions to Inger. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Inger McDowell Hardy, and I work for Unite Oregon. I use pronouns she, her, and our organization is led by BIPOC community members, including immigrant and refugees across the state of Oregon. We have 3 offices across the state, Rogue Valley, Beaverton, and Multnomah County, and we do organizing around equity issues pertaining to people of color, social justice, and racial justice issues. So thanks for having me. And I would say during quarantine, what I miss is seeing the staff. We're a pretty tight crew at Unite Oregon. We just moved out to 122nd and bought a new building, and we haven't been in it in about 6 months. So I don't miss the commute. So I'll say that, because I'm in inner Northeast Portland. So thanks for having me. And I want to acknowledge the Attorney General and you, Nancy, for hosting this. We really appreciate the opportunity to participate. So thanks for having us today.
Well, thank you. Long time Unite Oregon fan since CIO days. Johanna, tell us a little bit about you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having me, Nancy. And thank you to the Attorney General for inviting me here today. This morning, she said, would you like to join? And I said, sure, I'd love to. So thank you so much for having me. Again, my name is Johanna Costa. I use pronouns she, her, hers, and I'm pleased to be here today. I am the new Hate Crimes and Bias Incidents Response Coordinator for Oregon Department of Justice, and I came on board about 2.5 months ago. So post-pandemic, or mid-pandemic, I guess I should say. So I have been to the Oregon DOJ office once to pick up my laptop and have met this wonderful team at the AG office by, I think, a Zoom chat. And we speak every day, but it's been an interesting time to come on board and start a new position. But a wonderful organization, and working with Ellen and Faye Stetz Waters has just been phenomenal in following their leadership to start to really provide services to victims who have experienced hate and bias in our state. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about this new legislation, is that it really focuses on centering the victim instead of focusing on a criminal case or a defendant and the reasons for which someone would engage in hate or bias, but really trying to center a victim's experience and trying to make sure that that person is heard, that make sure that that person is linked with resources and referrals, and then making sure that we're really following what the victim wants to do in terms of next steps. And I'd love to talk about that a little bit more, but I think we'll get to that in a little bit. And then to Nancy, to your question about what have I learned so far in quarantine, to parents out there, there's this game called Monopoly Deal. And for those of you who think Monopoly, oh no, I don't want to play that game. That's 2 hours and it takes up my entire evening and not necessarily the most exciting game. This game, Monopoly Deal, I play with I have a 12-year-old son, and we play it regularly, and it's about 15 minutes. And the same concepts and a lot of fun, but still without the commitment of a full game of Monopoly. So that's one thing that I've really enjoyed in my time in quarantine. So thanks.
That's great. Thank you so much. Zakir, please introduce yourself.
Sure. Thank you, Nancy, for having me. And I'm really honored to be amongst the panel with this much prowess as all of you have here today. So my name is Zakir Khan. I'm the board chair for CARE Oregon, not the insurance company I sometimes have to tell people. CARE Oregon stands for the Council on American-Islamic Relations. We are the Oregon chapter. We are the nation's largest Muslim civil rights organization, and we are headquartered in a centered spot in Beaverton. We work to protect the community, the Muslim community, as well as a bunch of intersectional communities' rights as well. We've had a number of different successful campaigns, from advocating for people to be able to feed the homeless or the houseless through our Free Hot Suit campaign, as well as doing a lot of media advocacy to make sure that the Muslim voice is represented in the media, towards working on police accountability. It's been a critical function and a staple of what we've been working on. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I think one of the main things that I have learned since quarantine began is that there are a lot of systems that exist within Oregon that need dismantling. I think when coronavirus hit, one of my immediate concerns became the mental health for communities of color. And we have seen systems, in exploring that system in particular, mental health treatment is completely inadequate for communities of color at the moment. We've heard stories of people who traversed state lines to be able to gain access to a counselor of color. For the Muslim community ourselves, the number of Muslim counselors is very limited. And so we want to envision a new system coming out of this quarantine period, as well as the coronavirus period, where people have access to mental health care that they need to better support them. And so while we have this discussion about dealing with police accountability, but also supporting victims, it's also really critical to talk about what mental health supports are we creating for people.
Yeah, very important and issue near and dear to my heart. Thank you for that, Zakir. So I think that we have some good grounding in, or we want to get some good grounding in the hate crimes legislation that we passed in 2019, because I think it was a pretty remarkable piece of legislation. And why don't we begin with you, Attorney General, because I know you put a lot of heart and soul into that piece of legislation, and then I'll let other folks weigh in, because I know everybody has a different role in that legislation.
Sure, thank you. And I forgot to mention, my name's Ellen Rosenblum, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I also neglected to mention that Nancy and Bro were also involved in the hate crimes task force work that we did. Again, we tried to be as broad-based as we could be, and we had many people who wanted to be a part of it, and we weren't about to turn anyone down, that's for sure. So it was a very inclusive group in 2018. It was set up in between sessions. The task force was to review the laws and make proposals to strengthen the state's ability to support victims and to bring perpetrators of hate-based crimes to justice. So we created Senate Bill 577, which requires better police reporting, allocates more funding to victim services through our new hotline, changes the charging verbiage from intimidation to bias crimes, and also added gender identity as a protected class. And it was signed into law last September by our governor. And we had a nice event afterwards to celebrate along with the Bruce family, which was really quite wonderful to have them with us. Since then, we've done quite a bit of outreach about the hate crimes hotline, which went live in January, just around the time, a little bit before Johanna joined us. And Zakir and others were involved in our steering committee, still are, to really roll out the law. Because, you know, you can pass a law, and this happened with police profiling too, but if you don't then implement it, you need to have another task force or a steering committee to make sure that the law actually does get implemented properly. So that's what we're doing now. And we also created a PSA, which many of you appeared in, about how to make sure that people knew what to look out for and how to report incidents of bias crimes or bias incidents. And by the way, there's now a definition of both of those. They're different definitions. And the beauty of our new law is that you don't have to be able to prove a crime in order to be suffering a slight or an insult or an actual event that is more serious in terms of physical injury. Because as Zakir mentioned, mental harm is just as serious frequently, if not more so, than physical. And we have to take both into consideration. And sometimes we can't always prove a crime. And so our new law takes that into account, and so does our hotline work. Another thing I'm very proud of that we've done since January, unfortunately, as you all know, during COVID-19, there's been not only lots of scams and frauds, but there's also been a lot of discrimination aimed particularly at the Asian and API community. And so we created a call to action. We have over, I think, somewhere near 2,000 signers now on our call to action, which is still online at Stand Against Hate on our website. And we urge people to continue to sign that as a show, as a recognition and a show of support for our Asian and API communities. So what I would love to do is to, when the opportunity arises, turn it over to Johanna to talk a little bit more about the hotline, because I think that's where the community really needs to know what we're doing, and then maybe some mention also about our toolkit that's just recently been issued for law enforcement to help us, because we can't do this alone.
Sure. Thank you so much for that. Johanna, before you go into the hotline, because I think that has been something I know that we've been really a big, that we consider very important and that we want to talk about. I just want to talk a little bit more just about how we formed the legislation and the work that went into it and why. And I know, Zakir, every time I went to Salem to talk about this legislation, I'd see your face. So do you want to talk a little bit about CARE Oregon and your role in thinking about the legislation and why you've been so engaged? You're still on mute.
Okay, there it is. Sorry. So shortly after President Trump was elected, we saw a rash of anti-Muslim hate crimes happening across the state of Oregon. The Eugene Islamic Centers, several Muslim businesses, as well as other people were being targeted for a variety of different reasons. Ignorance, hate, any number of those things coupled together. And we really view that there needed to be a really significant effort to push forth on hate crime reform. Previous attempts, kudos to Senator Gelser as well as Senator Dembro, to try to advocate for reform had failed. People did not view it as a priority. And so we really engaged in a conversation with the Attorney General's office. And within one meeting, I give her a lot of credit, as well as her legislative director, Aaron Knott. Within one meeting, they saw it as a priority. And so one of the things that we were able to do is assemble a wide coalition of individuals to come together to work and advocate on this issue. Basic Rights Oregon, Unite Oregon, CARE were some of the community organizations. There was also the AG's office. Senator Manning also played a part in this as well. Senator Frederick was a really big proponent of this advocacy for many years before we even came on the scene. And then even in addition to that, you had buy-in from law enforcement, as well as the Oregon District Attorneys Association, as well as the Oregon Criminal Defense Lawyers Association. And so one of the really great things, I think, about working on this task force was that nobody was fighting each other.
Hey, Arlene, this is Dominic. I double-checked with Nancy. She should be getting it soon.
Nobody was fighting with each other. It was just everyone working in harmony and support of one another, and it really created a really positive, collaborative space where meaningful reform could happen. and where we could actually create some of the best laws in the country. I mean, people from across the country have come back to me and said, how do we copy Oregon's laws? And I think it really speaks towards the coalition that we assembled to work on this issue.
Thank you for that, Zakir. And before I move on to asking Unite Oregon, I want to share that Earline Budd, the unofficial mayor of the DC trans community, is on the phone. Earline, do you want to introduce yourself?
Thank you so very much. And this is short notice, but my name is Earline Budd. I'm a 61-year-old trans woman of color. Wow, I've been doing this fight for a long time. Almost getting tired, but just can't get tired yet. And right now, currently, we're still in the midst of everything that's going on with the president, reversing the Obama federal health care, even though we won a court victory around the discrimination. So we're fighting desperately, and I understand that that's going to be the National Center for Trans Equality and others are combining and working on that right now, trying to get this, bring opposition to the president's reversal of the Obamacare federal health care for trans people. And here in D.C., many of the trans women, especially of color that I work with, they don't even know the seriousness of what the president has done. And, literally, when I say to them that this president, not my president, but this president, is taking us absolutely backwards, and it's frightening. And we need to be, really, really aware that come November we need to vote. Most of the trans women, and by all right, they're struggling, on the street, homeless. We don't have a lot when it comes to housing and all that here in the district for transgender individuals, and not just for color, just in general. And don't speak of over 20 for the age 24. So, politics is not something that you hear a lot about. People like myself, I talk to Mara Kingsley occasionally, and she's always reaching out. And there's Ruby Serrata, who I can't say, but, just kudos. Many of you know is doing some great work. But again, that's focusing on the youth population, touch on those that are over 24, in terms of policies and things that are going on. And, we have I would say we have a okay mayor, and excuse me for saying it that way right now, but the mayor, Mayor Bowser, she's pretty much a good mayor in terms of focusing on transgender issues and the things that we used to do, like the former mayor, Vincent Gray, he, just redirected the entire health care so that trans women could get, facial feminization and so many other things. And, there was a constant meeting with the trans and LGBT community. Unfortunately, we don't have that same relationship with Mayor Bowser, even though, as I said, I have to applaud her, and, she is our mayor, so I have to be there for her. I have met her and been to her home on several occasions. But, those are the struggles that we have, and in Health and Human Services, there's a lot going on there with Director Ben Carson. And for the life of me, I can't understand why we can't have education and those kind of things, in the school systems again, in the shelters on how to, work with and treat transgender people. Excuse me, I'm just going all around because those are the real issues that we're faced with here in the District of Columbia right now. And I dare say there are probably things that other folks are also facing also. And the defund, hashtag defund police, there's so many events going on here in the district. I know that one of my colleagues, Tamika Spellman and Sharice Monet, they are working desperately trying to figure out how to work, get something done on the defund police, hashtag defund the MPD. But at the end of the day, I think I was asked the question, I'm sure that conversation probably will or may have come up during the break while I was trying to connect here about what were my feelings and, what are my thoughts in terms of, defunding the police. I'm all for this hashtag defund the police, but at the end of the day, I would like to see that there are other resources that are put into place. Like if someone, has mental health or something, if someone from mental health, responds to it, another police officer who ends up, using force or whatever the case is, because they're not trained to deal with those kind of situations. So I am totally also supportive of the defund police, as long as those, the dollars that we're talking about defunding are going into those resources that we sincerely really need for our community.
Thank you, Earline. Great to hear from you. I think it's really important that we make sure that trans voices are part of this conversation as we talk about hate crimes. So I'm going to shift and ask Inger from Unite Oregon to talk a little bit about some of the work you all did around this legislation. I know that you all worked with Larnell Bruce's family and with someone who had been a victim of Jeremy Christian before he went on to murder those two folks on the max. And so I know you were there in Salem and working with the families. Can you just talk a little bit about your Unite Oregon's work around this?
Yeah, well, so I think that our work goes back to 2001, kind of at the inception of our organization when Casey started what was then Center for Intercultural Organizing. And his experience dealing with the anti-Muslim sentiment and backlash of 9/11, and just him feeling, I think, called to be responsive to the community and trying to address some of the bigotry and hate crimes that folks were experiencing. And I think that kind of led us up to 2015 when we introduced through a coalition the in-profiling legislation that would really make it, it would make it a crime would make it a crime to identify people and try to provide an opportunity for people to get the protections they need so that they wouldn't be profiled. And so I think, this work has been, I think, really energizing for our community across the state. As I said, we have 3 offices that we've worked with. Our office in Medford, as you know, it's very rural, and we've had armed militias show up at our offices down there and try to intimidate the staff. And I think staff members and community, I think, were calling for some sort of reforms so that they could address the issues they were experiencing. And I think at the end of the day, Oregon is no exception. I think the fact that our hate crime laws hadn't been updated since 1981 was sort of a call that we all needed to lean into, and we needed a major overhaul. And I think with the direction of, as Zakir said, CARE and other groups like Basic Right Oregon, and with the leadership of the Attorney General, we were able to come together as a coalition and really address reforms. And I think we needed solutions to protect community members from what they were experiencing. And, people would email us, they would call us, and we really wouldn't have a way to help them. And I think now we have a way to address their grievances and also ensure that they feel like they can do that without retaliation, which is a big thing, I think, for communities of color. So I think when we look at, the national hate crimes, and that it's at 4.6% in 2015 through 16, and that Oregon's was up over 60% in that same time, that's pretty scary. And again, I think it's a call for us to address some of that. Some of the work we did on the ground was we collected stories. I think stories change hearts and minds. And I think we had a really robust field campaign where we were able to connect with people. We were able to write their stories, and we were able to send those to the Attorney General's office so that, she and her staff could make the case for why this was important. I think unless people are touched by these issues, they don't really feel sometimes that it's necessary. And I think it's about making it really tangible for people that you never know. It could be your neighbor or your daughter's friend in her classroom that's being addressed or being hit with bullying, or dealing with hate crimes at home or in their community because of their religion, because of their sexual orientation. And so I think this was a call to action from all of us. And I'm just glad that we had an opportunity as a community to come together and support each other to advance the legislation. I do think there's more work to do. And I think Casey Jama, our executive director, would agree this is just one part of it, and that we do have a lot of work to do, as the Attorney General said. But it's a good start. So, yeah.
Thank you for that, Inger, and for all of your work. And so, Johanna, do you want to tell us a little bit about the hotline itself? Because I think one of the most remarkable pieces of this legislation was that it gives people a non-police option to call if they've been the victim of a hate or bias crime. And also, when we were putting together that job description. We were like, what unicorn will we find to fill this position? And we have Johanna. So welcome. And we're really glad to have you on board with this very important position. So tell us a little bit about the hotline and how it works.
Sure. Thank you. I'm happy to be the unicorn that fit. So the hotline is available for folks to call in to report and receive support in the aftermath of a bias incident or hate crime. And although the statute specifies certain protected classes, we, in writing the protocols for our response on the hotline, we wanted to make sure that nobody was excluded. So if somebody is experiencing bias or hate based on, being having health coverage through OHP, or for being over the age of 65, or for any other number of ways that folks can be targeted, we wanted to make sure that folks got the support that they were calling in for. So we never hang up the line or don't provide services based on what someone is being targeted for. The hotline is really designed to be victim-centered. And so when I say that, I mean that the victim or the reporter's choices are really leading the way. We want to acknowledge that folks have experienced trauma, whether it was something that happened to them directly, or if it was something that happened to someone close to them, or something that they witnessed. All of those things, when we're talking about hate and bias, we're talking about something that is divisive, that is harmful, that is intended to degrade, humiliate, divide. And so it certainly harms and creates a trauma event for the victim, but it also affects the whole community. And so we want to make sure on the hotline that when someone does call, we're providing support, we're providing validation. We may be the first person to say, hey, that wasn't okay, and I am so sorry that you experienced that you witnessed that you saw that someone was harmed by that. It's not okay, and I'm so pleased that you reached out. So we want to encourage folks to get that support and make sure that they are connecting with folks who can provide them both immediate support, but then also ongoing support. When Zakir was talking about the mental health toll that hate and bias can create, it's not just today or right now, it's tomorrow. It's thinking about, am I safe in my community? What do people think of me? How do I belong? Who's going to take care of me? Who's going to stand up for me? And those are feelings that can last a lifetime. The intent is to divide and other, and it is often very successful for folks who experience this. And so we want to make sure that in an ongoing way, we connect folks to resources, culturally specific organizations that can provide some ongoing support for folks. I'll tell you that my experience answering the hotline thus far, the range of needs that folks are presenting is quite varied. There are folks who call in and they just want someone to know. They want to say, Johanna, are you writing this down? Is this being documented? It's a data point. Who's being targeted? Where are they being targeted in terms of their home or online? Where are they being targeted in terms of their geography? Why are they being targeted? And so we do document that with their permission. The other thing that, so some folks just want to make sure that we're writing it down. There are other folks who have intense needs that want to know what their options are for next steps. And so again, by victim-centered, we want to make sure that their choices are leading the way. Is it safe for them to report to law enforcement? Is that an avenue that they have already pursued? Is that something that they want assistance to pursue? Are they looking for someone who can check in with them on a regular basis? Are they looking for advocacy and navigating a system? Are they looking to elevate their voice and speak out about what happened? So really trying to suss out what it is that this person has called and is seeking, and then follow that path and provide them options, resources, opportunities to pursue what it is that they want to see next. So as we develop the protocols, as we develop the different ways that we are linking up with folks in communities across the state, we are learning a lot in terms of what the different experiences that Oregonians have, and we hope to continue to provide that support so that folks know that there is a safe place to reach out.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I want to start getting into the questions people are typing in because they're pretty great questions. So the first one is really about this moment we're in, right, of really talking about big systemic change, and especially around reforms around police and prison reform. And so the first question is, I'm curious to learn about how responses to hate crimes can be separated from policing. How do we work towards prison and police abolition while protecting those targeted by hate crimes? Which I think is a really interesting question, because we want to support victims, and we're also talking about shifting how people are responding to hate crimes. So, Zakir, Attorney General.
Well, if I
Sure,
might,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Zakir. Go ahead. I'm supposed
No,
to.
Go ahead, Attorney General.
Well, what I was going to say is that kind of flows right into our newly released law enforcement bias response toolkit that I also credit Johanna and Faye with putting out very quickly after after Johanna started with us. It's just really hit the airwaves, and in fact, I was invited to speak about it later on today as well. So what I love about it is that it gives law enforcement lots of suggestions in a very non-threatening way. Probably ideas that haven't really been part of the training of police. We've got to do a better job of training. So this is its own little toolkit, but it's also a little more subtly a training kit. It's like what to look for, look, we all need to learn. And if we can teach law enforcement when they're out and about, we're not going to be getting it's great that we get calls. We've gotten, almost 300 calls already this year to our hotline. People can also file a complaint, a written complaint. It doesn't have to be a phone call. But let's face it, the boots on the ground are still often law enforcement. And so if we can make allies out of them by helping them to understand what they're looking for and how to report what they find, and that goes back to the keeping track of the data. A big part of our new law involves reporting. And as a matter of fact, it's very exciting. On July 1st, we're going to have the very first, I think, complete report from the CJC, which is the Criminal Justice Commission, led by Mike Schmidt, who will soon be the district attorney of Multnomah County, but he's, I think, still there. In any event, it will bring together all of the reporting from our hotline, from law enforcement, and also from PUA, right? From Portland's United Against Hate, which also keeps track of the does a lot of the intake as well. And it will take all that information. And finally, as with profiling, we're going to have better reporting and better numbers and a better understanding of how we can then put that all together in answer to your bigger question.
Thank you. Zakir, did you want to weigh in?
Yeah, I did. So just adding on to what the Attorney General has just said, one of the critical pieces that has come out of hate crime reform is the ability to retrain officers as to how they ought to be doing something. And I think one of the things that's really a critical piece about this that is often not discussed in both training conversations, police accountability conversations, is that a lot of an officer's interaction with an individual simply comes down to communication. But when they're training for these things in the academy, and then when they're also going to police departments, they're often trained on compliance rather than interpersonal communication skills or intercultural communication skills. And so what the current moment can teach us from the work that we've done on hate crime reform is that there needs to be an entirely new package of training that is developed and centered upon how are officers communicating with the public, how are they interacting with individuals. And as some of the testimony that has played out already before the legislature, as well as in other places, has shown us, quite often those interactions just on an interpersonal level are not going well for individuals. We know this was a driver in the hate crime reform conversation because people told us, when I called to report a hate crime, the officer said it wasn't a hate crime and then to go deal with it. That one interaction will now forever define some people's view of law enforcement. And so critically, we have to examine, how are we training people so that they have the muscle memory and commit it to practice that they are going to be engaging in positive communication habits. And so that's one thing that started in hate crime reform, but also we're seeing it continue on into conversations that are going forth about how are we revising our curriculum when it comes to training law enforcement.
And Nancy, this is Inger. Can I just add,
Sure.
From the divestment perspective and communities organizing and asking for police departments across the country to shift money away from the police bureau into really thinking about more restorative justice, community-driven models that really reflect that we have a say in what those look like, and that that we reimagine it together with the police, and we know we need to do that together. We can't do it without them. But I think us being community-led, letting people of color let us tell what the vision should be is really, really important. And I think this is an opportunity for people to stop and really be genuine and listen. I think the groundswell you're hearing from communities across the country is a call to action, and I think people in positions of power need to be thoughtful about sitting and listening and really reflecting on what they're hearing. Because I think that the community, and we say this all the time as organizers who are on the ground, we already know what we need. We just need people to listen. And those people in positions of power are often not people of color. And that needs to change. But until that changes, we need to figure out a way to address the systemic racism and oppression that we face in our communities. And I think we do that by asking for systems to give us resources. We need the money in order to make the change. And oftentimes we're only heard when we ask for money to be shifted away from systems that don't serve us. And so I think we have a great opportunity, not only with the $15 million in the city of Portland that was now taken from the PPP, but for us to listen and think about what does it look like 5, 10, 15 years from now, and how we can do better to serve our community and how we can reimagine it together, because I think our community deserves better. And I think we could all agree on that. So this is just one step, but we have so much more work to do. And I think, again, it goes to restorative justice models. It goes to reinvestment in mental health services and housing supports for folks that are houseless. So I think that there is a lot of opportunity here. And I would just say that we should reimagine it together and really hold space for that, because I think it's really important.
Yeah, thank you for that, Inger. Yes. And there's actually a specific question for Johanna based on this topic, but what happens when it's police who've perpetrated the hate crime? I know this was a question that came up when we talked about forming the hotline, and that anecdotally we know that people, we know that people have a hard time with the police, and that there's as much racism and transphobia and xenophobia in the police as there is in general society. So can you talk a little bit about any protocols that the hotline has for dealing with that?
Yeah, so first I want to say that we, with the reporter, the victim's permission, we do document that. So we are keeping statistics that we share with the CJC for them to ultimately share publicly, because part of that experience is about transparency and what's happening in which communities. So we do, with victim permission, document that experience in terms of what happened, what the specific perpetrator, who the perpetrator was, what the experience was. And then again, we want to hear what the victim wants to see. So the hotline was designed in a way that I both don't go downstairs and talk at the dinner table about what a victim tells me, but I also don't share broadly a victim's story without their permission. And so if the victim is reporting that to DOJ, wanting certain next steps, then we investigate how we can take those next steps. If the victim is wanting to say, hey, I don't want this shared beyond you and I, but I want you to know that it happened and I want it to be written down so that, again, the targeted class, the experience, the location, that is documented, then I do document and share that with the CJC. In terms of if a victim is wanting to take next steps, then we talk about what the options are. We talk about what the options are in terms of elevating that experience, elevating their voice, utilizing processes, whether it's through the media, whether it's through getting support within their community, and go from there.
Great, thank you. And I wanted to hear a little bit from Earline. I know that often trans women have a very hard relationship with the police because of the way that trans women are perceived to be sex workers when obviously they're not. And so could you just talk a little bit about what you're seeing in DC around the trans community and the police? And you might be muted. Earline?
Hello? Hello?
Hi, Earline.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, as I was saying, one of the things about my history, I'm making no secret that I too am a former commercial sex worker. When I came up, I would say that it was difficult, and there were challenges. And today, I mean, some of those same challenges still exist, but because DC is kind of like the leading, nation and country, we really do have the ability to engage with the police a little bit more in terms of having conversations like we have in DC. We have the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender questioning unit, and those officers, they're like, and I mean, I'm being honest, they're on point in terms of being there, responding, and helping us. But that still does not carve out those rotten apples, and I think that's what we're talking about when we talk about the Floyd murder and the other folks that have been, lost their lives to violence. But there's still officers out there that clearly have not got it, that still have that stigma, that discrimination against trans people and others. And then, as far as the murders and the violence go, I always have felt that the United States Attorney's Office and others that have the ability to politicize and put on the forefront these murders. We have murders of transgender women yet still today in D.C. that go back 15, 20 years and more. And they have not been solved, nor have we seen any real effort to culminate, to bring them to the forefront like they pull other cases. We see cases where they call cold cases, and they pull those out. So we still see those situations happening. We do hear from trans women who are doing commercial sex work that feel strongly that they're being profiled. I guess that's the right word. Profiled because they are trans, and then they're out on the block and they find themselves getting into it with certain officers. And ultimately they'll find themselves either arrested, and some of them say that they're forced into sex acts and those kind of things too, which is unacceptable. So it hasn't changed. It's still, we still have a long ways to go, but realistically in DC, we do have officers that will respond, and do really, really well with the community. But we still have a subset of police officers who are bent on doing it just their way and forget what the law, the law says.
Yeah, thanks for that. It sounds like there has been some progress with the DC police and their relationship with the LGBTQ community. I wanted to move on to another question because we only have about 8 minutes left. Which is just a broader question about how we're informing people about the hate crimes legislation. I know there was public service announcement, but what are ways we're working to increase knowledge and education about the legislation? And are we speaking with schools or doing any education with youth so that they have this information?
Sure.
Attorney General.
Well, thank you. Of course, it's not going to be very helpful to people if they don't know about it. And so we have really made that a big part of our outreach efforts, beginning with the PSA, which is still out there. But that is one of the reasons that, in addition to Johanna, we also have, we haven't said too much about her, but we have an amazing civil rights director, Faye Stetzwaters, who has background as a 911 operator, background in the military, a background as a judge. Anyways, she is the person tasked now with the outreach, the civil rights outreach, which of course includes making sure that all Oregonians, particularly in diverse communities, vulnerable communities who aren't likely to contact us unless we contact them first, to report to us. So I think Johanna probably has some more specifics if I could ask her to sort of elaborate on that. But absolutely, it is critical that we get the word out. And our website, of course, is great and easy to access. standagainsthate.gov. You tell them what it is. I think that's it.
So the website is standagainsthate.oregon.gov.
.oregon.gov. Thank you.
And one of the ways that we are trying to connect with a variety of communities is Faye is so wonderfully connected to communities around the state. And that's something that in the last 2.5 months that I've been with the office, I've been really focusing on connecting with a lot of organizations and community groups around the state to make sure that, we have contacts, that we are communicating, that we are sharing information and making sure that this resource is out there. We are hosting with the Crime Victim and Survivor Services Division a series of 11 community conversations. And one of the tools that we have shared with these populations is that this toolkit exists, or that this hotline exists, but now we have an opportunity to hear directly from folks about in what ways is this system, is this hotline serving you, and in what ways can we make this service more accessible? How can we break down barriers and open pathways to having voices heard and experiences elevated? So those are also listed on our website under community conversations. And like I said, we have 11 sessions scheduled in July for that. But again, we try to just engage regularly with folks from a variety of communities and organizations around the state to make sure that they know that we are connected and that we're here and ready to listen if they decide to reach out.
And these community conversations are open to everyone, although they are sort of separated out by different marginalized and oppressed minority communities. So if you go to our website, standagainsthate.oregon.gov, and click on community conversations, you can pick the ones you would like to participate in. They begin on July 6th, and they're every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 1 to 3 p.m. And they are co-hosted with Bro. So thank you to Eden and to you, Nancy, for making this possible. We're so thrilled to do this with you. And I don't know that we've mentioned the actual hotline number yet on the screen. So I'm going to do that so that everybody knows what it is. You can jot it down, and you can also find it on our website. It is 1-844-924-BIAS, BIAS, or 2427 if you don't want to use those letters. So let me repeat it. 1-844-924-BIAS. And then 711 for Oregon Relay. Great. Everybody knows what that means, I guess, right? Okay, good. Thanks.
Thank you. So we just have a few more minutes, and I just would be remiss if I didn't mention that there's been several questions regarding transgender women and transgender people who are incarcerated, and TT Gully. And there's been a lot of high-profile incidents in our state regarding TT Gully, who is a Black trans woman who was found hanging at Rocky Butte last year. And there was a lot of questions about her death, especially by her family. And there was also, there's trans women, especially trans women who are incarcerated, who've had a lot of questions about their own treatment, not just questions, but issues with how they're being treated inside of DOC. And so I just feel like I need to represent for all those folks who are asking just like what we're doing as a state to move forward transgender rights and to shine light on what happened with TT Gully.
Absolutely. We need to do more than we're doing, first of all. So I just want, on behalf of the state, since I represent the state here as the chief law officer, we have not done enough. I think we've made a lot of, I won't even say a lot. I think we've made some improvements in the prison. I think we are more aware. We've been better educated as to the needs. We've brought in the medical providers and people who have the knowledge base, and I think we've been listening. But that said, we have a long ways to go. And to all the friends and family of TT Gully, we can never allow this to happen again. We have to make sure that, as with the Bruce family, as with the Max Train killings, that these are wonderful people whose lives have been lost, but not in vain. We must make sure it never happens again. So thank you for those questions. They're so important.
Nancy, it's Earline Budd. Can I just for one second, I want to respond to your DOC concerns and issues. As folks know, to reach out to me here at DC at Earline_Budd, that's BUDD at yahoo.com. I actually am one of the people that helped to develop the policy for our Department of Corrections, our DC jail, and we have a transgender committee. We do some great things here in terms of when you come in and you're transgender, you have to meet with the committee, then you're allowed and given the option of being housed based on sex at birth or how you identify. And I don't want to get into the conversation of the 95% where they choose to be housed, but at the end of the day, we offer that opportunity. And also, if you come out as trans anywhere during your incarceration, you're giving prioritization. So we're one of the few places that have advanced policies and housing where trans people can be housed based on their gender identity, which is within the female population. A lot of people think that, like in DC, we're not doing stuff, but we're doing some great stuff. And, my cell number is 202-210-3629. I'm very open and willing to talk to folks, and I think that the model that we have here in DC might really help with some of the other states that are struggling if they want to allow it. That's the issue. We're the nation's capital, so there's a lot of stuff we have to do, and we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Earline, and for being so open to giving us resources. And thank you for everybody for joining us today, including our people who've been watching. Felix Jackson, you are the winner of the tote bag. And thank you to our guests. Thanks for being on. And have a great rest of your Tuesday, and hope to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.